Hey, welcome to the Filmlings podcast,
where we try to learn more about film.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome to week 1, Spielberg.
How's it going, Jonathan? How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. Surprisingly not tired. I'm really happy about that. Good start to the year so far. Lots of energy, lots of work to be done. Good time.
We'll see how long that lasts.
It's not going to last long. It was a half week at work. It's going to kick my butt this week. I guarantee it. But it was fun while it lasted.
Well, we have got some movies to keep some energy into us right now. We're going to be watching a lot of movies soon, so
that
hopefully we don't get tired of them. But I really doubt it because we've got some good stuff lined up.
We do. I almost found myself being sad that we didn't have more movies to watch this week. Although I know it was a good thing we don't have more, because that would sap my energy. And the level we're at now is actually keeping me. It's really exciting. It's a really exciting thing to do, to listen through this many movies in a week and really think about them critically and let them soak into your head in a way that you don't when you just binge the entire Indiana Jones series at once.
Right. Or if you're like watching a movie and working or doing something else. So
exactly, like half watching.
Yeah, and we'll definitely reference some other films. Like you can't really talk about Raiders without talking about Jaws and Star Wars and some of the other stuff that led up to it. But definitely focusing on these couple movies.
Very true. So what is our topic this week? What kind of movies are we watching this week, Jonathan?
This week, we watched through 3 Steven Spielberg movies, starting off pretty basic. We watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, Always, and Lincoln.
We took 3 movies from 3 different points in Spielberg's career. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a very early movie in his career. I think it's the 3rd or 4th film he ever directed. Always is a late 80s, I think came out in 1989, 1990, something like that. So it's a mid-career project once he's been kind of established. It's also a passion project. It's something that he did because he really, really liked the story. Lincoln is a very, very recent movie of his coming out in 2012. And it also shows a more kind of mature, restrained side of his directing, as we'll get into here in a little bit. But it offers a very wide sampling of Spielberg's work, and it's very fun to compare the 3. I think you get to understand who he is as a director a lot more when you look at these 3 points across his career, because all 3 of them are very interesting points in his career, and they resulted in 3 very interesting and very good movies.
Yeah, and not only do we get to see a professional side of him, but I think these films reflect who he is as a person and just kind of different life stages that he has gone through and that everyone really goes through, from his very energetic, high energy early years to his more introspective and, like you said, restrained later years that we're seeing from the 2010s to currently.
True. And I'm starting to think maybe restrained isn't the right word. It feels like I feel like confident. Maybe confident and subdued.
Grounded.
Is more accurate. Grounded. I like that.
Grounded, yeah.
Grounded is a good word.
Okay, so let's kind of dig in. We're going to take each movie and kind of pick it apart a little bit, and then at the end we'll kind of go over some overarching things about Spielberg in general.
Right, and this is the spoiler-free section. Right now we're gonna do our best to not talk about anything that might ruin the movie for someone who might not have seen it yet.
Yeah, and this week should be pretty easy as far as these films. Either everyone has seen them, or they don't have spoilers, or it's historical fact. So the fact that Lincoln got shot in the theater is not very surprising. Hopefully,
right. If that's a spoiler to you, it means either you haven't gone to history class, or you don't live in America. In which case, hi,
Spoiler
and welcome
alert.
to America.
Yeah.
You should know Abraham Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater.
This is a long time ago, so don't freak out.
A very long time ago, yeah. Anyway, so what? Our first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones.
Classic.
And it is, as I was surprised to find out that it is just called Raiders of the Lost Ark, not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right,
As
that
I
was added
was.
as the series became a franchise, similarly to the way that Star Wars was called Star Wars until the subsequent movies were released, and then it was re-released as Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope.
True. Very true. Very true. So, do you know what the movie opens on? What is it opens on that mountain?
Yes, the Paramount Mountain.
Yes, that they had the poor location managers scour Hawaii for and found at the last moment. But it is brilliant. It is a brilliant opener to a film, very clever, cheeky without being quippy. It's not a spoken irony, spoken joke. It's just
And it's
very
not
subtle.
even really. It's a almost, I guess you could call it a meta joke, because it's pulling it back to the studio. It's not even part of the story. So, I mean, as far as the story is concerned, it's just a mountain.
Right.
But as far as the audience knows, they get the overlap literally of the logo.
Right, very true. And I think that shot sets the tone for the opening, the first 5 minutes, the first sequence of the film, and then
the whole the sequence with the idol is actually closer to 15 or 20 minutes, honestly.
Oh, it is. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I didn't have that time code here, but I figured it was pretty long. I figured
is.
it took a while.
But it feels like it goes really fast because it's kind of non-stop action.
It is. It's kind of a mini movie in its own right. I would watch those 15 minutes. I would consider it a short film. And then Raiders of the Lost Ark follows it. But it is really good. And I know you had a lot of thoughts about the opening and Spielberg openings in general.
Yeah. So that short film, as you call it, essentially, that starts the film, basically is a summary of what happens in the whole film. So Indy is on an adventure to find an object. He's betrayed. He has a lot of traps that he has to escape from, and that he uses his prior knowledge, which we learn in a couple more minutes that he's a teacher, so he has a lot of knowledge of old cultures and stuff like that. But at the end, it gets confiscated by Belloc, and it really, it's great in its own right, and it's great as a microcosm of the film in its entirety.
It is. Isn't Belloc just great? He's such a good bad guy.
It's great because he's classy and
I love classy
intelligent,
bad guys.
and he's a perfect mirror match for Indiana Jones, who's always one step ahead, which ends up being his downfall.
Right? Like Belloc knows Indiana Jones so well and knows he can outmatch him and uses that to outmatch him. It's fantastic. It's such a good dynamic between characters. But back to the intro real quick. It also sets up all of the themes for the film, all of the motifs for the film that you have to get used to. It essentially gives a quick character study just to let you know what you're about to see. So you're gonna see action and adventure. You're gonna see a swashbuckling hero who is a little cocky, which I always find ironic.
Very cocky at some points.
That's Harrison Ford's big line in the first Star Wars film. Don't get cocky, kid. And he's a very cocky man in this entire series, especially this movie. I would say a little more Temple of Doom, but we're talking about Raiders of the Ark. So you see him outsmarting the traps. You see him being a little nerdy, his more like archaeologist side, his professor side, as he outsmarts the traps. You see everybody constantly try to screw him over, which is important. So you're not supposed to trust anybody in these movies, and you get used to that. And
you see his fearlessness in the face of all these things, and two people betraying him, and all the booby traps and everything. He doesn't bat an eye.
True. Remind me, is there a snake in the first 15 minutes?
Of course there is. It's if you count the part where he gets away, which you should. I think the 15 minutes ends with them flying off into the sunset, which is such a great shot.
Yeah. That's the end of the short film, and then it picks back up with him in the classroom.
Yeah, but we get the first snake when he jumps in the cockpit of the plane. And the pilot goes, grow a backbone.
Oh,
which
right,
is
that's his
so
pet
great
snake.
because that's all we've seen so far is him being completely fearless, and the first thing the pilot says is toughen up, man. He'd missed all of this stuff. Whereas all we know about the pilot right now is that he can't decide whether to get the engine started or get his fish from his fishing pole.
Get his fish out of the water. I love how characterized that little extra character is, even though we never see him again. And that's something that Spielberg's so good at, making little characters who we never see again like real characters. Right.
They feel human and relatable, even if like he was probably on there for 1 minute, maybe.
Right. Like the guy, I can't remember if they gave him a name, but the guy who actually makes it through the temple with Indy and then screws him over at the end.
Yeah, and then ends up getting himself killed.
Yeah, even he's a very human character up until that point. He's the audience in the cave because he's terrified of everything. Like, he's terrified of the spiders, he's terrified of all the skeletons, and I would be freaking out just like he's freaking out.
And he's making all the same mistakes that we would be. I mean, if we were there, we'd step into the light and do not without even thinking about it because he has no idea, and Indy's like holding him back all the time.
Oh yeah, it makes Indy. It's a really clever technique because it makes Indy all the more cool because we're not just seeing him do cool things. We're seeing someone else be impressed that he's doing cool things. And so we sympathize with the person being impressed, and we share that emotion of being impressed by Indy. And not just the fact that he's Harrison Ford. But
so do you want to talk about Lucas and the things that you were not enchanted with this time around?
Sorry, I had that theme stuck in my head.
As you should.
As you should with every Spielberg movie.
Every John Williams theme.
Every John Williams theme, really, and that's key. But another big working relationship for Spielberg, and like every successful director, anybody in the industry, it's you don't succeed on your own. You succeed as a loose team almost of people working together who work together a lot and develop that repertoire and make each other better. And I do think that Lucas and Spielberg work together really well, but I think that Lucas hit the nail on the head when he's talking in that documentary, rating the Lost Ark,
which we'll include a link to in the blog post.
Yes, we shall. It's a fascinating watch. It's really fun, but he's talking towards the end when they're filming the climactic scene. And he's actually on set for that part. He's saying that his best skill is as an editor, both technically as a physical editor of film, but also as like editing stories, or advising on stories almost, and sitting back and making suggestions and looking at this bit and moving it around, which I totally agree with. I think that is Lucas's best role, is coming up with a story. And letting other people take on the brunt of the work, but he kind of sits back in an advisory role and works on it.
I mean, yeah, he's good at kind of seeing like a genesis, but letting other people flesh it out, and then he comes in and narrows it down again. Because I mean, if you know anything about the post-production of Star Wars, where it was just the original was just a mess, and
it was,
and it had to be heavily edited in order to make it the magic that it is today. But Lucas's overseeing of that makes sense. Whereas if you see like the original pitch for Star Wars, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, Luke is a general, and the R2-D2 and C-3PO are these ambassadors that are looking for this certain spice and stuff. Like, it's ridiculous. I mean, George Lucas gave us Star Wars, but it took a lot of people to really give us the Star Wars that we needed.
Yes, yeah. I think I think Lucas is very good at coming up with very fantastical ideas. And you're right. If you read that original treatment of Star Wars, and we might be able to find a link to it and put it on the site because it's such an interesting read. It's a very short read too. It's only a few pages, but it is ridiculous. But it's so out there that if you bring in some other people to really ground it and make the story relatable and functional and believable and make it really come alive on screen and in the editing room, then you can understand how it became the cultural phenomenon that is Star Wars. I mean, that we're still talking about and still ranting.
And especially if
about.
You have someone like Lawrence Kasdan, who also wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, bringing it back to our discussion.
True. Very true.
Who wasn't a long-term collaborator with Spielberg, but this one collaboration was really great for both of them, really.
It was. It worked out really well. And just one more thing on Lucas, because I can't leave without my parting shot. He's such a... He's a great creator. He can pitch a good story, but he is a terrible writer. He is not a good writer. If you look at that, just the dialogue in the new Star Wars is so cringeworthy, and so he needs somebody come in and ground him and make what he's trying to come across in a fantastical way believable. And I think that's what one of the things that Spielberg excels at really well.
Right.
Because all of Spielberg's movies, and all three of the movies that we're talking about today, are in a way fantasy. Even Lincoln, even though it's based in history, is so... I mean, he's such a mythical character in American lore these days that it's essentially a fantasy. And he manages to find a way to ground all of it. He grounds all of his movies in these finite details and this endless creativity. And I always like to say that a busy frame, Spielberg frames are always busy, and you can see where he offered little suggestions here and there to make the frame so busy and make the world that we're seeing on screen so damn believable.
But it's not busy in a
bad
sense
way.
of
No.
cluttered, right?
No,
It's busy in terms of intentionally placed little things that add to the image as a whole.
Yeah, it's alive. There's no parts of the frame that are dead. I think the moment when it really struck home for me was in our next movie, Always. There's this portion...
you want to move on to
Always?
Always?
Let's move on to Always. But I did want this one scene that really hit it home for me was right after it. So it intros on to a really daredevil. They're flying planes, firefighting planes, and scooping up water and dumping them on forest fires, and they fly really low, and it's super dangerous, and it's a really awesome intro. But right after that, the main character, who's played by Richard Dreyfuss, lands, and he's being kind of bugged / talking to his girlfriend Holly Hunter.
Well, he barely lands.
He barely lands. That's true. It's quite the death-defying feat. You get excited, which is another. That's just the great thing about Spielberg intros. They're so damn exciting, as all intros should be, really, or at least interesting. But anyway, they're walking through the camp back to their main warehouse base inside area, and they're walking past all of these folks who've come back from the front lines of firefighting. And as they walk by all of these guys who are firefighting, our focus is on Holly Hunter and Richard Dreyfuss as they talk and walk, and it's a wide shot. But all of the folks on the ground, as they pass by, roll back on their backs to let them pass and raise their legs in the air in this really specific way that almost looks like as if you imagine a king walking down a path and palm fronds opening up in front of him.
Oh, that's
great. It
great.
almost looks like that, but it's such a busy way, and or a live frame, and the way that the extras do it makes it feel like this is just how it's done on the base, and you instantly feel like the base is real, because you feel like that lore or that established base manner is already there, so it's already fleshed out. Everybody is there. Everybody knows each other. Everybody knows how to function with each other. So you're in a real place, even though as the movie ends up being. It's a pretty fantastical place and a fantastic movie to try to believe. It's just it's really well done.
Yeah, and a couple other things as far as the full frames that are created, especially from Always, is little things that we were talking about before, like the some character grabs a chicken wing out of someone's hand while their back is turned.
Yes.
That it's never mentioned. It's just shown, and it's just a great little thing for the audience to see. Or someone throws a sheet up, and in the little light that comes through the sheet, we see hands doing shadow puppets and stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Just for a
I'm
split
glad you
second.
saw that too.
Yeah, it's never highlighted, but it's just these little things. And Always was such a fun movie. Like, it is. Like, you could tell that. So the history of it is that there's a film called A Guy Named Joe that came out in the 40s or something. But Spielberg and Richard Dreyfuss loved this movie, and they would quote it together when they were working on Jaws. And so they eventually decided to remake it and make it a little more modern, so it's not World War II, but just firefighters and stuff. And so you could just see the enjoyment that everyone had working on this movie. It's so much fun. And going back to our intros, there's a shot that I'll include.
Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so I love this frame.
This such a good scene.
Yeah, this scene is great, and this frame just, again, it sets up the entire movie. We have Richard Dreyfuss standing on a stairwell, looking over a balcony, down at this big open area where all the firemen are clustered in there, and Holly Hunter is dancing with all the firemen and kind of trading off and stuff, and it just shows Richard Dreyfuss looking down on his girlfriend, his woman, dancing with another man, and that is totally the whole premise of the movie.
It is, and the other dude is in this frame.
Yeah, and he's watching, and that's...
What is that actor's name? Continue.
He didn't do much other than this. I think I looked him up.
Brad Johnson.
But he was great.
He was.
He did Left Behind and a lot of TV shows.
Yeah, he was a very good balance to Richard Dreyfuss's character.
Right, and it's like you see him, and he's kind of beautiful and perfect and all this stuff. But as the movie progresses, we see like he's a good guy, and he's fun, and he's not haughty or cocky like Indiana Jones. He's just a likable person.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
And all these characters were. I mean, Spielberg does such a good job with his characters and with his actors and melding them into people that the audience wants to relate with. John Goodman's character was beautiful in this film in every way.
I love John Goodman in this movie.
Wasn't he just the greatest?
He's so good. And he's not just comic relief, which is fantastic, because I feel like so many people would take a comedy actor and just waste them as pure comic relief. But he's comic relief that also lends like this emotional heavy weight to the movie at really important times.
Yeah. I know what you mean. The moment where he decides Holly Hunter needs to get over it and basically pulls her back into the story, and it's like you're right. He's not just the witty side character. He's like he has a real purpose in the film.
He almost physically pulls her into the movie.
Right.
Oh, we should also say what the premise of this movie is, because I guess we didn't say that.
Oh, yeah, we kind of just jumped right into it.
Yeah. So Always is a movie about a firefighting pilot who fights forest fires, who dies, and that happens pretty early in the movie. I don't feel like that's a spoiler. That's in the tagline.
Yeah, it's in and I'm going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah, he dies. And he's forced to become the guardian angel of another young pilot. But that young pilot is interested in his girlfriend, who was his girlfriend before he died. And it leads to a whole bunch of really interesting, both a nice mix of both hijinks and emotional stuff. And it's just a fun watch. Like, it doesn't sound like a fun watch. It sounds really depressing. But it is a fun watch.
And it does have that emotional weight you were talking about, but overall it tackles the themes of letting go and resolving yourself with the loss of a loved one.
Yes.
And also but but in a way that's more about the love between the people than about the grief, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yes,
it does.
But so anyone who watched a trailer for this movie, like, unless you just scrolled through Netflix and clicked on Always without reading a single sentence about it, you know that Richard Dreyfuss's character is going to die, and you would assume this is going to happen very soon. But Spielberg manages to keep you on the edge of your seat for like 20 minutes. There are at least 3 times when you think he's going to die, and he
right.
doesn't.
That was driving me crazy.
But it's so great because you know what's going to happen, and he still keeps you like drawn into it. So it's not just like, oh yeah, so after this fight he's gonna crash his lands and all this stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like if that movie was made today, he would be killed in his first flight in like the opening 15 minutes or something. Like if a modern studio and a modern director, although I guess a modern young director, I should say, because Spielberg's still alive, he's still kicking. He's executive producing everything.
It may even in a modern film happen in like the first 5 seconds. You know, like we start on black and we hear a plane crash, and boom, we're into it, because that's a very big thing right now. Is just kind of like, bam, hitting us in the face with whatever's happening.
The proper
Rogue One.
But I feel like it's so important in this movie because, as I was curious about it, because that's not what you learn in a screenwriting class. If you've ever taken like a screenwriting class or a playwriting class, yeah, you'll know about starting in the middle of action, in media res,
yeah,
and really starting the plot as soon as you possibly can to keep people interested. But the movie is interesting for the first 30 minutes before he kicks it. And it's necessary. Really important. It's so important to the plot of the film, as you realize once you get to the end and you realize what it's all about, because you don't really realize what it's all about, at least in my case, until like the last hour 45 minutes of the movie, what the real goal was of the movie, and what the actual journey the character had to take. It makes sense that he doesn't die for the first 30 minutes. You need to feel that relationship between him and Holly Hunter, and it gets so fleshed out. It's such a complex relationship to be translated in 30 minutes of screen time. Like there's people who I've known for really, really long times who've been in relationships for that long, and I don't understand their relationships that well. I think one of the important things about movies, and one of the things that really shines through in Always, is that the theme shouldn't always be possible to simply state the theme. Because one of the advantages of having, like, I think it's a 2.5 hour movie, something like that. It's a long movie. But one of the advantages of having all of that screen time and having all these really complex characters on the screen is you can communicate and delve in and explore themes that are too complex to really be spoken about in English. And I think that's one of the things that we hit in Always, is it's such a journey of loss and letting go, and it's so interesting because he retains this agency after death to understand and feel and let go and have to suffer and experience joy and humor that he's still going through, but he's also isolated at the same time, which is, maybe something you'd go through on your own independently if you didn't have, like, if you had a loved one die or if you broke up with somebody. That's such a deep, complex emotion that I couldn't find myself putting it into genuine words what Richard Dreyfuss's character was feeling towards the end, especially
in that feel it when you watch it.
But you can feel it. When you watch it, you get it in that moment, and I think that's one of the most important things in especially a super emotional movie. Even one as fun as this is just coming away with this certain understanding of humanity that you didn't have before, or at least communicating a very complex emotional feel that is relatable. Maybe that you do know it. Not every movie needs to be a learning experience. Like Raiders wasn't a learning experience for me, but it was really fun.
Right. Yeah.
It was really fun.
Yeah. The interesting thing to me about Always is that there's almost nothing almost nothing about it that I haven't seen before. You know what I mean? So the story is very much kind of Christmas Carol-y, It's a Wonderful Life kind of story where
Yeah.
where we see what happens when he's gone and how he learns to move past it, even though he's actually dead in this case. And the camera techniques are all like really kind of textbook emotional draws. So we have Richard Dreyfuss in blue light a lot of the times at night. We have foreshadowing with the plane at the beginning in fog and blue light, and it looks like a ghost ship. And we have the dance scene that's just bathed in orange halo-y light. But it's all done so well that I don't even care because my emotions were just in it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it didn't break a lot of conventions. It just used existing techniques and conventions the way they're supposed to be used.
True. Like, there's nothing... Yeah, and you're right. There's nothing wrong with those conventions. Like, they're conventions for a reason. But I think the real skill is getting the crew and actors and the director are all in tune and using those conventions to such an effect that you don't look at it and think of it as boring because of the conventions, but these techniques are taking the real effect and really punching home the way they're meant to. You know, when the technique works, I think that shows more than when the technique is done properly but doesn't really work on screen.
Yeah, because I think if any of the actors decided that this was just a boring, cheesy love story, or if the cameraman was like, just kind of wasn't in it, like, everyone put their all into this movie, and that's why it works. The characters and the crew believe that this story is what it is, and so it makes me believe it and love it too.
Yeah, I like that it's a love story where the characters don't say how they feel. They just feel, and you see it, and it's complex and it hurts, but it's not. Whenever characters just start blathering about their deep, complex emotions, like expositionally, I feel like it takes you out of it.
And it's a love story where they don't end up together, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
they end up apart,
dead.
and you're happy for them.
Yeah. That's weird. It's like a weird good breakup, unlike that Vince Vaughn movie.
All right, moving on to Lincoln. Lincoln was just great. I don't know.
It was just a really good movie. It's one of those movies that comes out, and you've seen this in I think the past decade. I think the proper term is Oscar bait.
Yes, that would be one of the terms.
And I don't think that's inaccurately applied here because I don't think that's on the creators so much as it is on the studios who pick what they make and when they release it, and they're all released towards the end of the year, right before award season comes out and right before the deadline. And I think Lincoln definitely falls into that category, and I was kind of worried going into it, honestly, that I'd be really bored, but I wasn't. I was so fascinated all the time.
Yeah, and it's not an exciting movie, but it's a good movie.
No, it's not an exciting movie. It's very much a sit and talk movie, but it's very, very well done. The the centerpiece of the movie, honestly, is the performances given by the actors and just the phenomenal screenplay, which I guess really boils down to dialogue, because all of the plot points are more or less set because it's historical.
Yeah, dialogue and production design, because that was amazing.
Oh, the sets are incredible.
I mean, because they're real, most of them.
Oh, most of them, yeah. They shot, I think in the Virginia Capitol.
Give us an overview of what is Lincoln.
Okay, Lincoln is a movie documenting, I think, the last 4 or 5 months of Abraham Lincoln's life, who, if you don't know, was the president who whose election kind of sparked the Civil War, but also who guided America through the Civil War and eventually won the Civil War for the Union, that portion of America, and took the southern states back in, and eventually passed a lot of amendments which ended slavery in the United States, and that is the main focus of our story, is this last big piece of legislation that Lincoln pushes through before his death, and in many ways kind of seals the nail in the coffin of his assassination, is the passage of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which outlaws slavery and frees all the slaves.
Which was a hard fought battle because the government is a bunch of
pansies,
conservative white people.
Yeah, it's hard. And
also the setting, the backdrop of the Civil War means that a lot of people don't want to upset people any more than they need to, which can be understandable.
True. Yeah. If you're not from, because this is American film, it's very American, and it was geared towards American awards, like the Oscars and the Golden Globes.
But it's also a very timely and just
America,
important film in general.
True. And if you're not from America, it's kind of hard to understand how deep the racial tensions go in America, and it's still such a sensitive subject to many people. So it's really impressive when you watch Lincoln, how well they deal with it in ways, and I'm sure plenty of people could find fault with it here and fault with it there, but that's just the nature of any controversial topic in America or anywhere, is people can find fault with it. But I think they did a really good job of keeping it about the conflict within the story and showing that it was people doing the best they could do for their values in the moment. And I think it's also important to watch it to try not to take our modern sensibilities and our modern values and our modern ideas of race and what that should or should not be and apply it backwards. Yeah. But I think one of the things that Spielberg does so well is put you in the time and place of the movie, and it's very easy to sink into 1860s America, Civil War America, in the sense of the movie and understand the values of the people in the film and what they're going through. And one of the things that I'm always impressed with by Spielberg is his setting. Like I was talking to earlier about the frame being alive, the frame being busy. There's no dead or unused space that couldn't be used to some effect. But part of it is in his production design. He always seems to emphasize detail, and I think that's one of the things that makes all of his films so when or at least nowadays, we think Spielberg, we think nostalgia. So you think nostalgia for like the 70s or the 80s with like Jaws or E.T. or something like that. E.T. was Spielberg, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But he does that. He does that in 1860s America, and I it's not like I existed in 1980s America either, but I feel nostalgia when I watch a 1980s Spielberg film. And I almost felt nostalgic for 1860s America, which is a weird thing to feel because it was the Civil War, and that's not a time you want to go back to.
I think the way that this happens is that Spielberg and Daniel Day-Lewis and all the actors, honestly, do such a good job of making you understand that our founding fathers were humans and were, because I mean, in history class, it's like, okay, you see this old picture of some guy and you hear what they did and stuff, but you can't really visualize like how that might have come across or how that might have happened. But seeing Daniel Day-Lewis interacting with people, just seeing and kind of just understand that he was just a good man, you know, who had the best of intentions, had a lot of forethought, had a lot of gentle courage, I think I would describe it as, in order to he put his foot down where he needed to, but he didn't do it in a tyrannical way.
Right, and he wasn't completely saintly either. He was a human, which is great. You can see how worn his face is, and you know he does some things in he's got some political savvy there. He does some things that maybe aren't so smiled upon when you think about politics.
Right, and he has character flaws too. So
America
has put him on a on a pedestal, but you see that he gets angry, he flares up, and overall you come away with this impression that's like, man, he was such a good, but then you're like, but there are these things, and it just makes him feel developed and a
Right.
real 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional human being.
Right. Yeah, I mean, his relationship. I love the relationship between him and Mary Todd. Who played her? I can't remember. It was Sally Field.
Yeah.
That explains it. She was amazing, but so humanizing, and just the struggles he had with all of his family. And I mean, they even slipped JGL in there, and I didn't even realize until halfway through his screen time, because they did such a good job making him
really?
look like. Yeah, I didn't
honestly,
realize.
he was kind of the one that might have pulled me out a bit. Is just because I see him as so modern. But
You
but
expect
other than that, he
bluebirds
was
to
just
start
great.
flying on the screen?
Do what?
Bluebirds to start flying on the screen?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
But
I know what you mean. But I mean, even like Daniel Day-Lewis, is the makeup job on him was so incredible.
I know.
I mean, he looks like he's. I mean, Lincoln wasn't. He was a pretty young president, all told. He took office when he was like 56, I think. But he went through his. That job just ages you, and he went through the Civil War too. He looks like he's like 75 or something in the movie, and he looks so worn, and he sounds so worn and so beat up, and the entire country kind of feels that way on screen. Is everything feels subdued, but in a way that it's subdued because it just went through 5 years of Civil War.
Yeah, but Lincoln always has a ring of hope in his voice, and the people who interact with him always kind of come out of the scene with a little bit more light in their faces.
That's true.
It's really amazing, just the way that you see Lincoln interact with the people who aren't the big important people. He's really like a grandfather to the whole country in a sense in this film, and it's just the way he sits around and tells stories with people, or the way you see people look up to him and quote his Gettysburg Address. It's just really down to earth.
Even Kyle Ren.
Yeah, Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren's in there. Yeah, that was pretty great. But no, you're right. That opening scene where you can't even see President Lincoln very well. I think he's mostly shadowed.
He's silhouetted, yeah.
He's silhouetted. I think that's a great choice, because right then you can just see his outline. You know who he is, and right then he's just a myth. And you see these soldiers interacting with him as if he was a myth. They're like quoting things at him and trying to get jobs from him and stuff like that. And that's our intro to the movie, and it's incredible, because right after that he comes away and you see, oh, he's just a person. He's not just this mythical silhouette. He's just a human who's struggling to get this movie passed, or not movies passed. Sorry, amendment passed. Ugh.
And the cinematography really kind of highlights the morality of the whole movie, I think. I mean, I don't even know if I could count the amount of times that. And the lighting is very naturalistic. It's very through the windows and stuff. But there are so many times when it's just
so nice.
bathed in light that is pouring in through a window or through a doorway or something. And yet, when we get into close-ups, we see a lot of shadows on his face, sometimes concealing one or both of his eyes completely, which is very unusual. So I mean, you get this mysterious and yet kind of saintly air about him just subconsciously through the visuals.
Yeah, and that's something that Spielberg really likes to do. Normally he really likes to show and highlight a character's eyes. He'll do pin lights in eyes and ring lights in eyes, just to get that highlight there. And they talk about this in an ASC article that is available online for free, and we'll link to it in the blog post. But normally he likes to open up on the eyes, but in this one he just like you said, he decides to keep it more mysterious. And one of the reasons that I think, at least, he was more comfortable with kind of stepping out of that comfort zone a little bit and trying something a little new, or trying something a little more innovative, that is just in his nature, of course. That's just what Spielberg does.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'm trying to find his name here. The cinematographer, the DP on this project. Oh, I can't say that. What is his name? Januz Kaminsky. Is that how you say that?
We'll go with that.
Januz Kaminsky is his DP on the project, his cinematographer, and he's worked with him. He's worked with him for like 20 years, since like Saving Private Ryan. They've done almost every single movie together that Spielberg has directed. So they talk about in this article how almost the entire crew has worked together for something like 5 years, something along those lines, and how easy it is to just fly through a script and just shoot it really well, fairly fast, in that amount of time, with the same crew, and just have that chemistry on set. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and he compares it with their shoot on Munich. Is that what it was? Where they were in another country and they had a local crew. Kaminsky was still shooting it, but they were losing time because even if your crew is very good, if you're not familiar with each other's working style, then you take a couple minutes here and a couple minutes there to explain kind of, okay, yeah, we generally would do this and stuff, but those minutes add up into hours by the end of your production. And so being able to have people that you've worked with for a long time who almost instinctively know what you're going to need next, it really kind of brings a production together.
It does. It's always shocked me how fast time spirals out of control on set. So
yeah,
so it just flies by, and then you realize you've only done 2 shots when you should have done about 12, and you're panicking.
But it's comforting to know that happens on big productions and not just little indie stuff like a couple things we've worked on.
Very true. It
seems like any production, there's never enough time, or you're always going to be an hour or two late.
And that's one of the things I admire like crazy out of Spielberg, is he almost always finishes on time, if not under schedule. I mean, he shot Raiders 14 days under schedule.
That's insane.
Which is insane.
Almost unheard of.
Raiders? like that's ridiculous. Holy
it's a
crap.
big movie.
He saved so much money doing that.
Yeah.
Which is fair. I mean, he had like the sword of Damocles hanging over his head on that film, but
right, because he had flopped 1941 and nobody wanted to give it to him.
Right, and then also one of the things I will respect George Lucas for is he got Spielberg the job, but it was also on basically Lucas's credit that he had garnered by making Star Wars. So it was he essentially told Spielberg, hey, you cannot go over, because if you go over, it's not just your head, it's mine too, and we're both like out of this business. So he didn't really have a choice, and he did it. And it's so amazing. Like, seriously, go watch that Raiders Ark documentary. Again,
Raiding the Lost Ark.
It's so good. And you can see Spielberg on set, and it's incredible because he does really complex shots. And he gives so many notes on set, not just to the actors, but to everyone, that they finished 14 days under schedule. Like, gobsmacked. It's so amazing.
All right, so let's talk. I mean, we're already kind of there, but let's talk overall Spielberg's career, his technique, his appeal. While we're on working relationships, there were a couple others you wanted to cover.
Okay, yeah. So we already talked about George Lucas and Spielberg's relationship, working relationship together, and how they both benefited from that. But there's also a few others who have just worked with Spielberg a lot. And I guess we already talked about Kaminsky, the DP. I'm not going to attempt his first name again. Who's worked with, he's basically shot every Spielberg movie in the past 10-15 years. But you also can't forget John Williams.
Of course
John
not.
Williams probably deserves his own podcast in his own right to just cover all of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about music, but I know that everybody knows John Williams is amazing. And, a Spielberg film
I'm actually curious. I want to see how decorated he is as far as Oscars. Hang on.
Check Grammys too. I feel like they'd give him something. But a Spielberg film isn't a Spielberg film without a theme.
5-time Oscar winner.
Wow. He deserves it. He probably deserves
Schindler's List, E.T.,
Yep.
Jaws,
Yep.
Fiddler on the Roof.
Yep.
I think I'm missing some. I know. Oh, Star Wars and.
Yep.
I know that. Oh, that wasn't him. I was thinking Lion King, but that's Hans Zimmer. Mobby, the other great composer.
No worries. I mean, he is the great composer, and I feel like John Williams, he had a great working relationship with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg early in all three of their careers, and kind of led to both John Williams' success. Although certainly, I'm not saying that if he hadn't worked with Spielberg, he wouldn't have succeeded. He's an amazing composer in his own right, as he's shown over the past decades. But it set the tone for all of their careers. I mean, Indiana Jones, Jaws. Yeah. Did he do Jaws?
Yeah, he did Jaws.
He did Jaws. He did all of Star Wars. E.T., like you said.
Superman.
Superman, just amazing themes. And George Lucas and Steven Spielberg's movies are almost, I wouldn't say completely, but almost completely dependent on themes for emotional cues with the audience to really set the tone. And when you think Indiana Jones, it's hard not to just start humming that theme. Dun, dun, dun,
or
dun,
Star Wars.
dun.
I mean, any of these films. And there's actually a great clip. I don't know if you ever saw it. Someone took just the straight last scene of Star Wars, the ceremony, and removed the John Williams score.
Oh, no.
So they're just walking down the aisle for like 5 minutes with no music.
Is it super awkward?
And it's so awkward, but
I actually get a little uncomfortable watching that scene with the score. Like, the score is incredible, but I also feel like it could lose a few minutes.
But
without it, oh my, that is...
It makes the whole scene. It just shows what a powerful tool that a good score can be.
Yeah, that's just awkward. That's oof. That's not fun. Yeah. Anyway, also, there's plenty of actors who've had repeated work with Steven Spielberg. Probably the two that come foremost to mind. Obviously, Richard Dreyfuss, who is in Always, one of the movies for the week. But he's also famously in Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I also want to throw out there that he's in American Graffiti, like a really young Richard Dreyfuss, which is actually directed by George Lucas, but is an amazing film and is probably the source of the working relationship between Richard Dreyfuss and Spielberg. That's how they ended up meeting. I don't know if you've seen American Graffiti.
I have not yet.
It's another nostalgia-driven film, just this time for the 50s. Quite good, very good. Also, Harrison Ford, obviously, who's just has become an icon over, basically because of the movies that he starred in for George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. I mean, without Indiana Jones and Han Solo, of course there's Blade Runner too, that I think lives fairly large in the public imagination, but without those two big series, I don't think it would be the same. And I was shocked to find out, because it seems, to me, someone who was born well after all of the original Indiana Jones movies had come out, it just seems obvious that Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. Like, you couldn't have anyone else be Indiana Jones. But it was shocking to me when I watched that documentary. And again, I really recommend it. That originally they wanted to cast Tom Selleck as Indiana Jones.
Yeah, the little audition tape was pretty funny.
Yeah. That was the little screen test. That was quite fascinating. I think it would have been interesting. But he had a contract to do a little show called Magnum P.I. that he got called into,
that's
which turned out to be quite good for him. So everyone benefited in the end, and we got we got a very swarthy, very swashbuckling Harrison Ford to be our Indiana Jones, and I'm very happy about that.
So, yeah, it's actually interesting. Scrolling through IMDb, I'm actually surprised at how few actors are in more than 2 or 3 Spielberg movies. Like, he has a good spread of actors. I mean, he's got Tom Hanks in there a couple times.
Yeah.
He's got Robin Williams a couple times, but nobody that just like dominates his films as like the one person that you can always expect, like you see with, say, Quentin Tarantino or Wes Anderson or something. He really does spread out his stars amongst the Hollywood talent pool,
which is kind of shocking, and I actually think really cool. Like, I like that he's this very successful director who can do that.
Yeah.
And part of it is that we're looking at the films he's directed, and that's really the focus of this week.
Right.
But it's also interesting, and we were talking before the podcast about this, that when you go to Steven Spielberg's IMDb page, the section, the primary section, the section that's expanded, is the producer section, because he's produced way more than he's directed. He's only directed like 56 films, and that might not sound like a lot, but for someone who's 70 years old, it's a shockingly small amount of movies.
Whereas he's produced, I'm looking at it right now, 161. So that's literally double the amount of films that he's directed.
Yeah. It's really interesting. But you're right. Normally with a really successful director, you'd expect the same few actors to constantly show up, like in a Quentin Tarantino film, like in a Wes Anderson film, almost like this cult of actors and talent who travel with him. And I think Spielberg it seems like he has that in terms of crew, but he maybe doesn't have that in terms of actors, and I think part of that is that he directs less than one movie per year. So, on average.
Yeah, just in general. Okay, so a couple other kind of things. Like we talked a lot about how relatable and entertaining his characters are without falling back on like quippy dialogue or crude humor and stuff. Because one of the things
I know you hate the quips.
Yeah, one of the things I've been finding in all the Marvel films is that the dialogue is so like one-line joke driven that really one-liner. Yeah, and it kind of evades the need to take the time to have the characters get to know each other, and by doing that, the audience gets to know the characters. When you're just kind of like evading with little short jokes and stuff, you don't get underneath the surface to really understand who these characters are and what makes them human.
You're right, because and I want to preface this by saying I'm a huge Marvel nerd, and I love Marvel movies, but you're right in that the humor isn't character driven, and that's I think that's a big loss, because you can make a joke and that joke can also say something about a character, but it's really hard to do that with the one-liners, and I think the one-liners just became such a part of Iron Man, and they drove it out. But that is one thing that you see in Spielberg movies, that the humor tends to be either very, very practical, in which case it's very set up, funny stuff like the monkey in
which even setting
Raiders.
up the humor of the monkey is a precursor to making his death more tragic at the end. Like, pretty early on, like I guess halfway through the from the introduction to the monkey to his death, spoiler alert, that the monkey is basically a spy, but you still love the monkey because he's adorable and he is best friends with the other characters and stuff, which just makes his death more tragic and almost heroic in a way. Like it's never stated, but you kind of feel like the monkey ate the poison dates as a warning.
Yeah, you want to think that, at least, because you love the monkey. It's weird. It's the most conflicted I've ever felt about a character doing a Hail Hitler sign is when the monkey does it. And I'm like,
I didn't think about that.
I'm so torn, because I'm like, that's awful. You should not be doing that. But also, oh my gosh, it's a monkey hailing Hitler. That's kind of cute. But also awful. What is happening?
Who had to train the monkey to do a Heil?
I think they said in that documentary that they did like 50 takes or something.
Oh my gosh.
They were trying to get the monkey to reach for a grape, and it reached for it in different ways, and eventually it happened correctly.
All you need is one time.
Yeah, it's all you need is that one take, man. But yeah, it's and I think, you know, a larger point of the humor in Spielberg films is that he does a good job of keeping it there. Even his really, really serious films, all three of the films we're talking about have very serious themes, and in high stakes, but are also very funny. Like Raiders is hilarious.
Yeah, but you don't go into it expecting it to be a comedy, and you don't come out with it thinking of it as a comedy. It's just the comic relief in a way that doesn't detract from the story. Like if you look at a Michael Bay film and you see Transformer testicles, like that really just
stupid.
Detracts from everything. Like the humor in Spielberg films pushes the story forward.
It does. It's back to and I do hate the word, but world building. I hate that word because it's treated like it's something new, but it's not. But it's something that Spielberg's so good at, because the humor is so integrated into the movie. So it's not just
it's almost more world infusing. It's putting us into this world, and without even making us question whether it's real or not. You know,
true.
World building is like trying to make us believe this world, but Spielberg just kind of assumes you are going to think that the world is real, and we do, because the people are real, and if the people are real, we can believe anything that they do.
That's true, and I think that's what makes franchises and individual movies so successful. So even like Always and Lincoln, which, you know, one is a super sweet, very dramatic love story about death, and the other one is you know, also a very dramatic political story that ends in death. The other one just starts in death. So, but they're both very serious, but they're also I found myself laughing a lot in those movies. And I think, you know, like we were talking about with the world infusing, I think to have a movie that's all humor or all drama, or even predominantly one of the two, is on itself a lie or a farce, because life, I mean, not to get too melodramatic here, but life is dramatic, and it's drama and humor. It's both together.
And I mean, this is fundamental storytelling. Even Shakespeare's darkest dramas, like, you have the humor, you have the humorous characters, you have Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in Hamlet who don't know what's going on and end up dying, but they still provide a comic relief in their interactions with Hamlet, who is pretending to be insane.
Yeah, it's quintessential stuff. And I mean, that Shakespeare humor, once you really understand it, is really crude, but it also kind of fleshes
mostly
out
in the comedies, but yeah, in all the even in the tragedies, you have those humorous moments and those things that can kind of get down to a human level, even if it's dealing with really lofty ideas.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
One thing I kind of wanted to mention about Lincoln that I forgot is the fact that they don't show the assassination. You know, did you?
Oh yeah.
Did you notice that? It's completely, but it leads you on. You end up, first of all, there's a scene in the middle of the film of Lincoln and Mary Todd in a opera box in a theater, watching an opera, and this is a point where in their marriage has kind of hit a rough patch, and of course the country's in a rough patch, and the fact that they're in a theater and it's Abraham Lincoln just raises your tension level watching the scene to like 11.
Yep.
Because knowing historically what happens, and then again we return to a theater at the very end and we pan over, and for some reason I found it interesting that every depiction of Lincoln's assassination is him sitting in a box on the right of the theater.
And they did the left.
And they went to the left. And
I love that.
It was... I don't know why. That's such a weird subconscious thing. And so they pan to the left to a box, but it's Lincoln's son watching a film.
Yeah.
And the play comes to an abrupt stop, and a herald essentially walks up onto the stage and says, "The president has been shot." And it's just such a new, nice way of showing us something that we know is going to happen without showing us something that we've seen 100 times before.
Yeah, it's very throwing back to the film brat thing. The reason I wanted to bring that up really was because you see in Spielberg's work how much he studied other directors and other producers, and you can tell when you're watching his work, like this guy's watched his Hitchcock. Like he knows how to mess with an audience. He knows how to misdirect and whisk them around. And like Always is based off of what, like a 1940s, 1930s film.
And it feels
Raiders,
like it.
Yeah, and Raiders is based off of a 1930s set of serials, or just like the idea of 1930s serials. But and I think that's one of the reasons why we're starting on Spielberg. And that I think we both, I know I do, and I greatly assume that you do, that we both respect and admire the work of Spielberg so much. And the reason that we're doing this project is that we want to know our stuff. And that's why it's so fascinating to study someone like Spielberg who's already done it. He's already done that study. He's watched so many films, and he knows what he's done, and he's taken this journey. So it's so fascinating to watch him and then see something in his movie that reminds me of a director who came before him that he probably watched. And that's very fascinating to me. And you can see him work these tools and misdirects. And
he's done it successfully for years. Like, Spielberg has built a career making good films. Spielberg is a household name. If you pick up a camera and start filming something, someone's going to say, "Oh, what, are you going to be the next Steven Spielberg?" You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and I get that all the time.
even if Steven Spielberg has not made all masterpiece films like Kubrick or something, he has consistently made extremely good films that are technically excellent. And even if he flops one, like a certain Indiana Jones movie that will not be mentioned, he always comes back, unlike other directors who make one or two bad films and then they can't really seem to get their footing again. Spielberg's work George Lucas. Spielberg's work always, like, over time seems to refine in a way that, like we stated at the beginning, he moves from a very energetic and ambitious young man who's entering the film world with a lot of new ideas pulled from a lot of old ideas, like we were just talking about. Mm-hmm. And then over time he's become much more grounded and introspective, like we said at the beginning again.
You see that path between Raiders and Lincoln. You
almost see a parallel between Lincoln and Spielberg at this point, where they have both made a lasting impact. They are well respected, and they're kind of turning their view in on themselves and seeing what is going to be their legacy after their work is done.
Yeah. Oh, the temptation to sing an Alexander Hamilton song right now is strong. But not the point.
We'll spare everyone that.
Yeah, this is not a musical podcast. This is a film podcast. But yeah, and Spielberg's kind of known almost, I feel like, out of almost any other director, as the film nerd, like as the cinephile director, which, I mean, all directors quintessentially are, except maybe Michael Bay. I feel like I don't know. I feel like I see his movies, and I feel like he's not watched any other movies ever. But I might be wrong on that. Who knows? Anyway, I feel like Spielberg's such a movie nerd, and we are both very large movie nerds, and we just like talking and thinking and looking about directors. Oh, and Tarantino. Tarantino's a huge
Yeah.
but he's also like a kind of a weirdo.
Yeah, Spielberg seems more human than Tarantino.
Yeah, I don't want to like kink shame him or anything, but like he's an odd guy. He's definitely a cult figure. But
we'll definitely do a week on him later. Yeah. Also,
Spielberg's managed to be a film nerd and achieve mainstream success, which I just find fascinating.
Yeah,
he's such a cool guy. And his movies are so fun to watch, especially as a film nerd, because you get it
and they're classy. Also, I just want to put that out there. He hasn't like degraded to like a lot of shock and awe value, because he knows that his films can carry without it.
Yeah. They stand up on their own, and they hold up. And this was something that I was wondering as I was watching a lot of, especially Always and Raiders, but more so Raiders, was that I really like these movies, and I think they have a lot of value, and I can enjoy them now as someone who grew up in an age with a lot of like CGI and over the top computer effects and big flashy stuff. But what I wouldn't give to be somebody who's never seen a movie before and then watch Raiders, or like only seen movies that came out in like the 1950s and then watch Raiders, and like really appreciate those effects for how amazing they were for the time. And I think they still hold up fairly well. Like they're not obviously
absolutely
perfect compared to like what we have now. But they're still really good effects. Like that final scene with the ghost and the Nazi face melting. I mean, Nazi face melting. That's classic.
Yeah.
That's so classic.
It's also great because there's one scene they're digging up the they found the catacomb, if you will, where the Ark is stored, and they're digging it up, and there's a worm's eye view looking up at Indy, and there's these swirling clouds behind him. And I don't know if it was necessary for the graphics at the time, or if this was intentional, but it reminds me of Moses from the classic Charlton Heston 10 Commandments film, where he's standing on the rock, parting the sea, but he's got the swirling storm clouds behind him, and that small little background piece in that shot really kind of brings in the literal biblical proportions of what's going on, and it was just a great little like you said, nostalgia throwback.
Yeah. Oh, and I think we can also say that until further notice, and please let us know if you find one, Raiders is the earliest Skybeam that we have been able to find on film. And it's something that if you frequent movies these days, you will always see the bad guy or the bad thing or the doomsday thing that is happening is a skybeam. Always a freaking skybeam. And that, I think it's because it's really easy to do in effects and it looks really impressive. But everybody's doing it, and it's starting to become a little passé. But I can't find one before. I can't think of one before Raiders. I would not be surprised if there is one, but I cannot think of one before Raiders. And if you know of one, please let us know. I want to know what the earliest skybeam was.
Yeah, we'll try and include. I know I've seen a little mashup photo of like all the skybeams from Avengers and all these movies. Just so you know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, so many skybeams. They're everywhere.
All right, I think it's time to start wrapping up. So, is there any final thoughts that you have?
I just want to say that everybody here should, anybody listening out there, should really watch a lot of Spielberg movies because they are awesome and they are fun.
Yeah, they're great for all ages. Honestly, they're educational if you're trying to become a filmmaker.
Yes, and that's definitely our goal with it. But even if you just listen to this to get a deeper appreciation for the movies you watch, definitely take that away. It's important to remember when you watch a Spielberg film, even though you don't have to remember it to enjoy it, just how amazing it is that the thing you're watching exists, and how impressive it is that Spielberg's career is what it is. And now I'm really excited to talk about next week. And
yeah, we've got 2 weeks of directors that we both like, that are kind of off the radar directors that each the other one has not heard of. So do you want to set that up for us?
Yeah,
Start
yeah.
with the next week?
Next week we'll be doing some films by the wonderful director, bit of a weird director, but he's really good. His name is Jim Jarmusch. He's done, and the 2 movies we're going to be watching by him are Stranger Than Paradise and Broken Flowers. They're 2 very, very good movies. 2 very different movies you'll find, and from 2 different eras of his career. Okay. He's a very indie director.
Yeah, I'm excited because I know nothing about Jim Jarmusch. I've been looking him up a little bit, and I'm very interested to see what kind of work he does.
Well, I haven't seen Stranger Than Paradise. Okay. I have seen Broken Flowers, which it has Bill Murray in it, and it's a very good Bill Murray film, if nothing else.
Well, I do like me some Bill Murray. All right, well, I'm excited to talk about those films with you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun this week. I'm looking forward to next week.
All right, well, stay warm, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, see you later. Bye.
Bye.